Hey everyone, I'm Caroline Nihill. This is Government Grinds, and I'm here with the wonderful Ann Lewis, who formerly served as the GSA TTS director, which, to break all those acronyms down, it's the General Services Administration Technology Transformation Services Director.
2 for 2 on acronyms, Caroline.
Great
to be here.
I'm about to break down all the CIOs, CISOs. How do you pronounce this? CISOs?
I've heard people say CISO, yeah, Chief Information Security Officer.
It's too close to SISA for me.
Yeah,
not the agency, the singer.
Endlessly confused. Wait, what?
SZA, SCA.
Oh.
And then SI. Or, oh my gosh, CISA. Oh, see, I told you it would happen.
I come on to the FedScoop podcast here to learn about what Gen Z is listening to with music, so I can pretend like I know about it later.
We were just talking about 21 Pilots.
A band I don't know about.
Listen, and it's okay. I think you do know that.
Okay, fine. I'll listen to it after.
We'll listen to it. Yeah, we'll have it'll just cut to us listening to it at the end where you're like, I have heard that.
And then I'll be like, here's some music from the 80s that I would like to give you as a generational gift.
What are your top 3 bands from the 80s?
Probably, I mean, if we're going late 80s, early 90s, the Pixies is one of my favorite bands of all time.
Wow, yeah. Okay, yeah.
I'm definitely appreciating how the 90s are kind of back in a nostalgic way.
Yes,
they never left some of us.
It wasn't a phase.
No, it wasn't a phase. And we were just talking about OK Go and Power Pop. That's also really fun. But there's also just like stupid pop bands like the B-52s.
The B-52s. I've never.
Rock Lobster.
Love
Shack.
Oh, Love Shack. Yeah, I know Love Shack.
Yeah, they have a whole thing. It's very ridiculous and vampy. Lots of wigs, lots of
like
choruses. Yeah.
This
will definitely become my metaphor for government somehow.
Well, we have these fun little question cards.
Ooh.
Which we're gonna read them. I was about to make a joke about someone preparing these for me, but then I feel like people would take that seriously. Like we were talking about that deadpan thing where people would be like, really?
I honestly think Caroline should consider a side career in stand-up comedy because deadpan delivery is really solid.
It's people prepared this for me. I'm being held here against my will. Yeah. Adam said that I can't eat lunch until this podcast is over.
Caroline.
Yeah, honestly. But I wanted to talk about you and your kind of like what you're up to right now. Because you are out of government, and I'm not going to sit here and be like, you're free from government. But like, hey, however you feel about it. But, what are you up to these days?
Well, I've been working on a handful of projects. Yeah. There are a lot of people who left the Biden-Harris administration and are just, working together on some of us are working on telling the stories of government tech over the last 4 years and thinking about the future and trying to think about platforms for reforms. Like how can we do product management better in government? How can we do budgeting more effectively? How can we better connect up from a tech perspective, the goals of the legislative and executive branch? So one of the projects I'm working on is writing a series of articles for the Niskanen Center. The first one of them just came out, and another one is going to come out in another couple of weeks. That's going to be called something like How to Save $1 Billion, because my theory that I think is shared by a lot of other government technologists is the government, in the way that they do management of large modernization projects and implementation projects, and some of this has to do with IT procurement, the government overpays sometimes by orders of magnitude for work. And so sometimes these projects that could have cost millions of dollars end up costing billions. And a lot of people have chimed in to try and understand, why does this happen? How can we change the structure of how government works? And how can we make sure that from a tech perspective, we're doing things right and we're paying for and funding and managing the right order of magnitude of complexity and features in a way that really works for government. So I think there's a lot to explore there that I'm really interested in right now.
Absolutely, especially when cost is on the top of everyone's minds.
It's a bipartisan issue for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that is true. I mean, everybody wants to cut costs, and right now there's a lot of talk about efficiency, and there's a lot of talk. But I want to talk more about what you're working on and the articles that you have coming, and like the focus on cost and kind of documenting and taking a snapshot of like, this is what's going on. This is the terrain. And can you talk to me about, maybe what you're thinking about for modernization budgeting and helping, like you said, the legislative and executive branch working in concert together. Can you break that down a little bit for me?
Sure. Yeah. I think part of it has to do with the way that we think about and run IT procurement. Part of it also has to do with the shape and structure of budgeting. And I'm going to quote Jen Palka, the author of Recoding America, in a
Yes.
couple different places here, but adopting what she calls the product model for budgeting and management of projects, as opposed to the project model, I think that's key for the legislative branch in terms of how they think about appropriations, for the Office of Management of Budget in terms of how they think about structuring agency budgets and setting expectations. And then also there are ideas there that the executive branch needs to bring into how implementation management is done to better align projects, budgets, goals to outcomes over outputs. And so an example that a lot of people have seen in a lot of projects and a lot of agencies is that there's some critical benefit system that everybody relies on, and it gets older and older and more fragile over time. It costs a lot of money. It's not delivering the services that Americans need. And you could really put any benefits system you want into this example. And so at some point, there are enough service delivery issues like long call wait times or websites falling over or healthcare.gov like failures that gets the attention of all of the political decision makers, and they get together and say, oh no, this system is old, we need to modernize it. And so Congress and the Office of Management and Budget put together a really large budget with the belief that more money equals higher priority, and they assign it with an urgent mandate to an agency who then, as step one, start a procurement process with usually a ceiling amount of that giant budget. So vendors bid, some vendor comes on, and then the vendor starts doing what they call requirements gathering. So they start to write a really long document of every possible thing this modernization project might need. And typically, specific goals or assumptions aren't tested before they are built into the underlying systems that the vendor makes. The vendor isn't given a lot of guidance from the agency in terms of what specifically to build, when, or how to start. And in this environment of uncertainty, vendors will do what anyone might reasonably do, and they'll hedge. They'll try and put every possible thing in this requirements document so that they can be not wrong in the future.
Yeah.
They also quite correctly anticipate changes in political priorities and changes in administrations, and so they just try to build a requirements document that has every possible thing that anybody might want to build in it. And then at some point, someone in the agency signs off on this requirements document and work starts. But the work often happens in kind of like a silo or a vacuum. No one is talking to the users of the systems. Maybe the agency isn't getting regular updates from the vendor. There's probably some sort of contract surveillance that's happening, but it's usually that process involves checking off long lists of items that the vendor had pitched to the agency, saying, we're going to do the following 150 things. The agency checks, oh, are you working your way down the 150 item thing? Great. This is a very specific example of managing to outputs. The outputs are we checking things off a list that we put together? But what they're not doing in this process is identifying user-centered outcomes. So what does the system do? What was it supposed to do in the past? What is it supposed to do today? Have we asked users whether those things are things they need? What are the problems we're trying to solve here? So this like outcome-oriented thinking is sort of the default way of operating for a lot of private sector companies. It's a relatively new concept in government, and it's a little bit at odds with the structure of contracting and budgeting. So you carry this story forward a few years. At some point, the agency receives pressure from Congress or the Office of Management and Budget, who are asking, well, we gave you these hundreds of millions of dollars. Where's the thing? Where's the modernization? Show us the modernization. And then the agency goes back to the vendor and it's like, we need a demo or we need a report or something. The vendor, if they haven't been given any feedback on what to prioritize, they've been prioritizing some things that made sense to the vendor in absence of additional direction, and they show a demo of the thing. And this is the first time where assumptions are validated, users engage with the thing, stakeholders see what it is, and usually what has been built, sometimes for years, sometimes with hundreds of millions of dollars, is not necessarily the right thing that everyone expected. And then everybody gets feedback, the vendor course corrects, but at this point, they've put hundreds of millions of dollars into building infrastructure that supports and sets in stone a few key assumptions. So it's expensive to redirect, it's expensive to change. And then how the story usually ends up going is at some point, more than $1 billion is spent. The agency or OMB reaches a budget cliff. They force an imperfect system to launch. No one's happy with it, but they give the vendor more and more feedback, who then ask for more money to make more changes. So this, in aggregate, I believe, leads to the government overpaying by orders of magnitude for systems and services. And the way to not do this, to do it more efficiently, is to constrain work as much as possible by managing complexity, by being super clear and upfront about assumptions, working iteratively, using the principles of human-centered design to regularly test assumptions before setting them in stone with implementation work. And to be able to do all of these things, you need to get the public-private partnership relationship right. So I don't think that the solution is firing people. I don't think the solution is cutting contracts necessarily, although I'm sure there are some contracts that don't need to be there.
Sure.
The solution is making sure that agencies have tech workers in where implementation is happening and these big strategic decisions are being made to help the vendor prioritize, and that vendors are using some of these tech industry best practices to work with the government. Vendors know how to do all this stuff, but sometimes people write contract language that either tells them not to or just simply doesn't tell them to, and so they don't. So I think adopting these principles, and in particular focusing on using tech industry best practices to constrain complexity, work iteratively, regularly test assumptions, and deliver work early and often, that's the way to save billions of dollars, maybe even trillions. I mean, if you take this example or this pattern and you extrapolate it back across the last few years of government and the incredible amount of money that's spent, like I do think this is the way to make government more efficient.
Yeah, and I mean, like you brought it up, not me, but I mean the firing and the cutting of contracts. It's like you had my question cards beforehand and you didn't, and so we are skipping ahead.
Mind meld.
She read my mind. She did. So I mean, we're skipping to the modernization card now, and
I'm proud of you for having a modernization card.
I do have, because you know that I love talking about modernization.
I love talking about modernization
too.
Who
doesn't love talking about? You guys aren't kikiing about modernization? That's crazy. That's crazy. I thought I was going to use that word today, kiki, and I did. So I mean, like, it sounds like you've been thinking about this since you were in government, since before you left government, which you were a political appointee. So, like, obviously that was a time. And, you know, I feel like you covered, you know, what you think it should be, the fault lines that you see in how government works to become more efficient. These weren't strange things to us. I mean, like 5 months ago, that wasn't. How many months has it been since?
Who knows?
January.
Time has no meaning. Yeah.
Time. We're here to be bleak today, guys. Time is made up. Anyways, so can we talk about Doge? I mean, like, can we?
Sure. Like, so with the understanding that I am not a part of this administration and I don't claim to speak for them, but I have been reading a lot of news and kind of hearing about what's been happening. So I, as a civilian, I do have some opinions.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah. And I mean, like, kind of in the line of, you know, the U.S. Doge service, which is an acronym inside of an acronym. But, you know, how they're talking about how they're modernizing the federal government. Do you believe that that's aligned with what you know that technologists in the government were working through? You look at things like FITARA, you look at things like FISMA, like which is more regulatory, I believe. But, like, you know, these things were happening, and to hit the gas pedal completely on it, you know, do you think that the way that they're going about modernization will be fruitful?
You know, that really remains to be seen. I think that every administration for the last few administrations since the Obama era has brought in tech folks and structured them in different ways in agencies and given them mandates to, like, figure out how to fix this, figure out how to do stuff better. And so this is the latest attempt. I think that, like, they've been given a lot of access very quickly, which is in contrast with previous administrations, previous digital service teams, previous versions of USDS, for example, had to spend a lot more time getting a lot less access to systems and data and senior decision makers. So they are able to move really quickly. It's hard, honestly, to understand what their goals are a lot of time because you'll just sort of start to hear stories of, like, well, Doge got into this system and they asked for God level access over here, and then they disabled audit logging. Why? Like, what's the goal? Like, I think it would be helpful if this new administration's technical leaders articulated their goals more clearly. Because otherwise you just hear about things like, for example, disabling audit logging. That seems dangerous. Why do that? If you're
Can you break down what that means?
Oh, exactly? Sorry. Yeah. So in line with FITARA and FISMA, CIO shops and agencies have been empowered to own and manage all the different kinds of cybersecurity risks an agency or organization can have. And there are a core set of best practices for this that have been widely known in the tech industry for 15 or 20 years. And NIST has standardized sets of these cybersecurity controls in cybersecurity frameworks like NIST 853. I still have that memorized. It will never leave my brain.
It's just ingrained in the back of your head.
Yeah. I mean, got to warn the other government technology leaders. Like, you'll never forget the NIST specifications.
You will never forget. I've written up a few NIST frameworks, and every time I'm like, I don't think I'm...
NIST is living rent-free in our brains.
NIST is living rent-free in our brains. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
But there are a lot of interesting ideas in there. Like, one cybersecurity concept that for me has come up in all of the jobs I've held over my 20-year career is this idea called the principle of least privilege, where you grant people and other systems access to a system or its data or features of it that is only the access that these people or other systems need to be able to perform their work or their tasks. And if you control access in this way and have graduated layers of access that are managed together in a coherent system that itself is audited and monitored, you can control for risks like insider threats or foreign nation states attempting to hack you, or anyone trying to hack you or break in and take your data. And so having these layers of access management is a pretty standard tech industry concept that applies to databases and servers and complicated systems of databases and servers and users that all interact together in what we typically call a distributed system. And so audit logging just means that whenever a person or a program does a thing, that we note that thing happened. And it's helpful in the same way that having paper-based voter ballots is helpful. If there's an issue, you can go back and look at the actual log of what happened and decide whether aggregation steps or something else change the behavior of a system in an unintended way. So that's an important concept that as systems mature and evolve, they add more and more layers of, and it's pretty unusual for anyone to have a reason to disable that.
Yeah, and what are the consequences of disabling that? I guess it's kind of to me apparent, but it's then you don't know what's going on. You have no history of that.
Exactly.
And does that count as kind of destroying feels like a strong word, but it feels like the right word, destroying federal records?
Potentially, we just don't know, because the thing that would tell us has been turned off temporarily. So even if people or systems have good intentions and do harmless things while the audit logging is disabled, or while the security permissions have been disabled, anyone could sort of come in through that open door and do whatever, and we wouldn't necessarily know until it was clear what the damage done is.
That's really scary.
It is a little scary. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Adam agrees. Our podcast producer, he's not in his head. And to me, that screams security risk, and that kind of goes against what we believe, not what we believe, but what we know modernization to kind of hold. I've talked to Representative Connolly plenty of times, and when we talk about modernization, it goes without saying that security is a huge part of that, because how do you modernize a system if you're leaving a door open?
Right.
That's not modernized. That's a national security risk. It's just a security risk in general. So it seems to me that DOJ does, from this, from our conversation, that you're saying, this doesn't really feel like it's working towards modernization.
Well, it seems like it varies a lot based on agency and project and individual person involved. Some of the news stories that I've read seem like there are DOJ engineers doing useful, helpful things at agencies. And in some cases, I've read stories where a DOJ engineer was granted God level or admin level access to a system, disabled some cybersecurity protections, carried out some, something, taking data, looking at it, using it for something, without necessarily communicating clearly to stakeholders what they were doing. And that's the place where I just think if, this administration's leaders more clearly articulated their goals, that could assuage some risk. And as we know, chief information officers who have been empowered and mandated by FITARA and FISMA to control cybersecurity, if those folks are able to control for risks and manage their systems, manage their hardware, and manage their software in ways that they believe are keeping America safe, maybe we're fine. But we need to make sure that we're respecting those rules and following those best practices from cybersecurity frameworks that the government has already deeply internalized.
Yeah, exactly. That feels like an important thing to do. That feels like, NIST once again living in my mind rent-free.
Yeah.
Rent-free.
853, we'll never forget.
853. And now I'll never forget it either. NIST 853. And like we talked about, you mentioned healthcare.gov. And, that is, we pointed to that as like a modernization error. Like that was just, it wasn't a good time. I think I was maybe.
Yeah, a lot of people point to that story as like a reason that they joined government, or a reason they learned about best practices from modernization, or a reason why they tried to work with their agency to do stuff better. And I think it is a great learning example. It's a story that involves lots of different vendors working on lots of different pieces of this very complex modernization. Or I guess it was in that case, it's not modernization. They were trying to create new systems from scratch. But many, many vendors, big budgets, urgent mandates, but there was a lack of single owners making decisions and held accountable for those decisions from the very top level of, does this website work and how do we know? Have we tested it end to end with all of the pieces of the puzzle together, as opposed to just testing the individual pieces? So that's something that was missing in that story, that's often missing in both modernization and just large implementation projects in general. You need empowered owners, especially on the agency side, and ideally people with a product management background, to be able to say, here's what done means for this task, here's what done means for this whole category of projects, and here's what done means for the ultimate experience of this system as lived by the American people. So, for example, not throughput testing to see that more than 3 people at a time could use healthcare.gov. That's something that someone could have tested for and been accountable for testing if they had been installed in this sort of a leadership role and had authority to get all the vendors together to do that kind of scale testing ahead of time. But that category of like ownership is something, again, that's very common when you look at how the private sector manages really large projects like that. There are product managers and product owners all through the stack of the complicated systems and the complicated projects. And we need more of those in government. And I think that they can work together with contract specialists and contract officers to hold vendors accountable from a contract surveillance perspective, but also from a user experience and product management perspective, to make sure that we're not just getting done all of the things that we put on the list, but we are actually building something that works from the perspective of users who use the system, that solves problems that Americans have that government should be solving for them.
I think that launches us beautifully into our next card, which is about the workforce, about needing people. And, I think that wow, I had a transition in my head. It's gone just like that. But
we could use a music metaphor if you want.
We could use a music metaphor of like, imagine if you were missing a boy from Boygenius. And here we go. I am on the right card.
Which is a great band.
Which is so, and then 2 of the boys are dating now.
I know.
Julian and Lucy.
It's almost too cute.
It's almost too cute. And then Phoebe posted about it.
Yeah. I still listen to that album all the time.
I have that on vinyl.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
I have, you know what else I have on vinyl?
What?
You're going to make fun of me. It was given to me as a gift, but it is the Blue album from Weezer.
I think that's cool now.
I think it's cool now.
It was cool in the 90s, then it became really uncool for a while, and now it's back.
It's, I honestly, I hate to admit this on the podcast, but I think it's a no-skip album.
Ooh. Sure. I'm going to go back and listen to it.
Okay.
And then start a Twitter flame war with you if I disagree.
Whoops. Yeah, or Blue Sky.
Blue Sky. I'm more active on Blue Sky now.
Yeah, you are active on Blue Sky. I'm trying to get there, but I feel like I'm just like dipping my toe in.
It's a really cool new social media company that I'm not endorsing. I'm a civilian on this call. But
I'm also not endorsing.
But it's an interesting attempt at like taking on, I guess, like Web 2 architectural paradigms in the social media space, where like they are managing and controlling the data, but you can build like other kinds of applications on top of Blue Sky so that you can have a lot of different ways of surfacing content in a way that's more open. It's a really interesting company.
It is cool. It is interesting. And, you know, I feel like a lot of people were like migrating really fast to other like kind of Twitter-like platforms. And everyone was like, I remember like the day that like I was like, you got a Blue Sky? All right. Should I make Blue Sky? And
I'm just excited to see more small companies in this ecosystem because, like, being an old, I remember 15, 20 years ago, there were more small tech companies. We weren't locked into 4 or 5 platforms for everything like we are now.
Listen,
I would love to see a small business startup revolution here with more options.
That's, you know, and I'm only 24, and so all I remember about the tech revolution is watching Club Penguin music videos on YouTube. I'm just really, I don't have a filter today. I didn't want to say that.
I remember a time before YouTube.
You remember a time before YouTube?
I do, yeah.
That's, when you did get YouTube, what did you watch? Like what was the first thing that you saw on YouTube?
It was probably like tech conference videos or something really boring like that.
No,
yeah, it was probably
boring.
Like
that's
Java
cool.
Conference videos.
No, that's cooler than mine.
Is it? No, I don't think it is.
No, it is.
No,
it is. It's because it was that and like Fred.
Okay.
Fred was and Bo Burnham, early Bo Burnham.
Mm-hmm. I love that for you.
Thank you. The other day I pulled that out in a meeting and I was like, I watched Bo Burnham as a child. And now
you did, folks. You
I
heard
did,
it here.
and I did. End of sentence. Period. But I wanted to talk to you about the workforce.
Yes.
And you formerly served as a TTS director, and I know that we talked a lot about the team and bringing people into government. No more. No more. Not that they're. I mean, like I don't think explicitly saying no one can come into government, but we're seeing these huge reductions in force.
Yeah.
Specifically at GSA, I mean, 18F was folded overnight. We know TTS is looking at 50% reductions. And, I guess I'm curious what you think will happen to the government technology workforce in all of this kind of reduction.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think it's a wasted opportunity. TTS hired maybe a little more than 300 tech workers over the last 2 years. Most of them were from the private sector. And for a while there, government was hiring more than the private sector was for particular categories of jobs. And so our hiring processes were insanely competitive.
Yeah.
I think HR made us cap our application maximum for each individual contributor role at 600 applications. Then 600. That filled up really quick. And then that was a lot of resume review work. And then they made us cap it at 400. Yeah. But, very, very competitive processes. So last year, hundreds of people who beat out on average 500 of their peers for these roles to take significant pay cuts to come and do a tour of service in government. A lot of these folks are now gone. And I definitely respect them for showing up to serve. They will have no trouble finding other jobs. But I think, the government could have benefited for the service that they had been willing to do if they wanted to redirect that energy and experience and expertise in particular directions. And, leaders can disagree, but I do think that having more engineers, product managers, designers in where these large implementation contracts and modernization efforts are happening can not only help the government best represent its interests to vendors, but also make 9-figure projects cost 7 figures by simply controlling scope, clearly prioritizing, testing assumptions with users, all of these things that we talk about when we talk about modernization. So those are folks who have been let go who could have helped with those projects and programs. And some shared services teams are also getting cut as well. Some are not. Some are supported by the new administration. And these are the choices that they are making as the current leaders. But I think that there's also an opportunity for GSA to lean harder into understanding what work agencies are paying for over and over and over again, or just doing over and over and over again, and creating shared service models that involve tech products and delivering them out to government in ways that save agencies time and money. And it's not just the time and the money that's saved, it's also when you build a software as a service model in the private sector or build a shared service model for a program in government, you're creating economies of scale where once a system becomes hardened, it's not only something that's a building block that agencies can use, that they don't have to pay to build again and again and again, but it also gets better over time as it's hardened by many clients. You get all these different ways of having economies of scale within a shared service model. So, I think that there was and is an opportunity to lean into that, but cutting back the people who are working on that means you're not actually investing in that. So, yeah, I think it's a little bit tragic for sure, for government specifically. And I think that, again, if the new leaders could more clearly articulate their goals around the cuts internally and externally, then people would understand more what they're trying to do. In absence of a clear explanation or a clear strategy or vision, the cuts feel arbitrary and indiscriminate. And that's where I think you start to lose trust, not just with civil service, but with the American public.
Yeah, I think that's super insightful, and I always really love hearing your perspective on that, because you do have direct experience in both the private sector and the public sector. I mean, I've stalked your LinkedIn plenty of times for stories, and I'm like, did she do that? She did. Which is what I do for all of my sources. So if you see me on LinkedIn, know that I'm either just curious or
well, thanks for being one of 12 people to read my op-eds. I appreciate it.
Always. I am always at least one of those people. And then sometimes I'm also like, I send it to 5 people and I'm like, read this, read it.